10 things that might surprise you about New York City real estate. Number one, buying an apartment doesn't always mean that you own the walls or even the real estate. In New York City, a big part of our market consists of co-ops. Now, with co-ops, you own shares in a corporation instead of a deed to the space that the apartment occupies within the building, like you do with a condo. The corporation owns the building and residents are shareholders. Number two, co-ops dominate the New York City market. About 75% of the inventory in Brooklyn and Manhattan is co-ops, not to mention Queens and the Bronx. Co-ops are a huge part of our marketplace. Now, I know that they have co-ops in other cities in the United States, but from what I understand, they don't seem to operate the same way they do here in the city. It's very much a unique New York thing. Number three, closing costs can be staggering in New York City. Depending on what kind of property you're buying, your closing costs could be somewhere between 4 and 6% of the purchase price. That's a huge number. We have New York City and state transfer taxes. We have city and state mortgage origination and mortgage recording fees. We have the tax with a terrible name, the New York City mansion tax. We have all kinds of miscellaneous fees and taxes. In addition to that, you have to pay for an attorney because New York is an attorney state. So closing costs can be huge in New York City and something you definitely want to take into account when you are budgeting for your purchase. Number four, all cash offers and all cash purchases are pretty common in New York City. It really depends on what the market is doing, but they're very common. There was a real estate attorney at one of our sales meetings recently who was telling us that in the last quarter of 2024, nearly half of the deals that came across his desk were all cash. That's a big number. Why would you buy an all cash? Some people will buy an all cash to make their offers more attractive to a seller. A cash offer is always more appealing and more attractive than a finance offer, all other things being equal. When the interest rates are very high, some people make the determination that it's better to buy an all cash. But these deals are very common in New York. It's a competitive environment and cash deals are pretty common. Number five, in New York City, or specifically in Brooklyn and in Manhattan, we don't use an MLS. An MLS stands for Multiple Listing Service, and it is a centralized database where all the listings and all the information get fed in so that all the agents have access to all of the information. We don't use that. They use it pretty much everywhere else in the country, but we just like to be difficult here in New York, so we don't use it. There is an MLS farther out in Brooklyn that some companies use, but none of the big companies use it. I don't have access to it. None of the top agents really have access to it. It's kind of amazing. The Real Estate Board of New York did create a database that's similar to an MLS, but not every company is a member of the Real Estate Board of New York. So we don't really have a centralized place where all of the data for all the listings gets collected. It makes it kind of like a wild west sort of situation. And, it's something we get used to, but people are always shocked that we don't have that here. No MLS. Sorry. Number six, in New York City, real estate agents and brokers do not write contracts. I know in a lot of places in the country, real estate agents can write up a contract. I'm licensed in Connecticut, and I can technically write up a contract, although I don't normally. But in New York, this is an attorney state. We don't write contracts. Attorneys have to write the contracts. And these things are pretty complicated. And it makes the transactions take longer. It makes things more complicated. I guess we just like to be difficult here in New York, but that's the way it is. Number seven, there are no contingency periods built into real estate deals, at least not into residential real estate deals here in New York City. In other states, when your offer is accepted, you have, as a term of your offer, a contingency period. I just sold a house in Connecticut. They get a 7-day contingency period during which they can do a home inspection. They can do all their due diligence. And during that time, the seller can't sell it to somebody else. We don't have that here in New York City. It's a competitive environment. If your offer is accepted and you want to do your due diligence and you want to do a home inspection, it's on you to do that as fast as humanly possible and then get your contract signed before somebody else swoops in and takes that property from you. Good times. Number 8. Here in New York City, we rarely use lock boxes. I know in a lot of the country, when you go to sell your home, the agent puts a lockbox on the house, and buyer's agents can bring their clients through and see the house. We don't really do that here. It happens once in a while, but we rarely do it. For one, a lot of our sales listings are in apartment buildings where you can't really use a lockbox. And number two, it's just not part of the culture here. The standard is that listing agents, sellers agents, provide access to properties. They're on site to answer questions. They show the property. So yeah, we rarely ever use lockboxes. It's not a thing here. Number 9, air rights to buildings can be sold separately from the actual building. So you have a building in New York City. It has what's called floor area ratio. That is the maximum amount of square footage that can be built on that lot. And part of that, if it's not built out, is air rights. You can sell those air rights to a neighboring building. Developers will often buy air rights from an adjacent building so that they can use that extra square footage and build their structures taller. It's a thing, it's a calculation, and it's something that we often look for, especially if we're representing investors or developers who are trying to max out the value of their property. Number 10, property taxes in New York City are not always logical. While the price points in New York City can be very high, sometimes astronomical, our property taxes tend to be significantly lower than those in the nearby suburbs of like Connecticut, New Jersey, Westchester, Long Island. It's not logical, but it's one of the few ways where you can actually save some money in New York City.